What happens when a child's pure heart exposes the shallow games of the wealthy elite? This is an absolutely incredible story that will leave you speechless and make you question everything you think you know about love, family, and what truly makes someone worthy of being called a mother. You're about to witness how one brave 7-year-old boy shocked an entire party of millionaires with a choice that stopped everyone in their tracks and changed lives forever. If you want to see this amazing moment unfold and discover how it transforms everyone involved, make sure to smash that like button right now, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell so you never miss these powerful stories that touch the deepest parts of your heart. I'm also incredibly curious to know where you're watching this life-changing story from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll never look at the people around you the same way again. The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Beacon Manor, a sprawling 30-acre estate nestled in the hills of Montecito, California. The Mediterranean-style mansion, with its terracotta roof tiles and hand-carved stone facades, had been home to the Blackwell family for 3 generations. But today, it buzzed with an energy that was both exciting and overwhelming, as dozens of staff members prepared for what the society pages were calling the social event of the year. Alexander Blackwell stood on the marble terrace overlooking his infinity pool, his cell phone pressed to his ear as he barked instructions to his personal assistant about last-minute details for his son's 7th birthday party. At 38, Alexander was the CEO of Blackwell Enterprises, a global investment firm that managed over $50 billion in assets. His great-grandfather had built the family fortune in oil and railroads. His grandfather had expanded into manufacturing and real estate, and his father had modernized the business with technology and international markets. Now, Alexander was pushing the company into new frontiers: renewable energy, biotechnology, and space exploration ventures that had made him one of the youngest billionaires in America. Alexander's personal life, however, had been far less successful than his business empire. His marriage to supermodel Cassandra Vail had been a fairy tale romance that had captivated the media for 3 years, before crashing spectacularly in a divorce that had dominated headlines for months. The custody battle had been brutal and public, with both sides airing accusations of neglect, infidelity, and emotional abuse. In the end, Alexander had gained primary custody of their son, 7-year-old Benjamin, while Cassandra retained visitation rights that she exercised sporadically between her international modeling assignments and new romantic entanglements. The truth was that neither parent had much time for actual parenting. Alexander's days began at 5 in the morning with calls to Asian markets and ended near midnight with West Coast client dinners. Cassandra's schedule was equally demanding, with photo shoots in exotic locations, fashion weeks in major cities, and the constant travel that high-fashion modeling required. Benjamin had essentially been raised by a succession of nannies, tutors, and household staff, who provided the consistency and care that his biological parents were too busy to offer. Today's birthday party was supposed to change all that. Alexander's publicist and image consultant had convinced him that hosting an elaborate celebration would help rehabilitate his reputation after the messy divorce and demonstrate his commitment to being a devoted father. The guest list included over 300 of California's most influential families: tech moguls from Silicon Valley, entertainment industry executives from Hollywood, political figures from Sacramento, and old money dynasties whose names graced museum wings and university buildings. But the most unusual aspect of today's celebration was something that Alexander's current girlfriend, Victoria Sterling, had suggested during a strategy session with his social team. Victoria, a 32-year-old art gallery owner with impeccable social connections and matrimonial ambitions, had proposed that Benjamin's birthday party could serve a dual purpose: celebrating the child while also providing an opportunity for him to choose a new mother figure from among the eligible women present. The concept had been presented as innovative and child-centered, a way to let Benjamin have agency in selecting a maternal influence for his life. But everyone involved understood the real purpose. It was a sophisticated competition among the single women vying for Alexander's attention and, more importantly, access to the Blackwell fortune and social position. The potential candidates had been carefully selected and discreetly informed about the special ceremony planned for the afternoon. Dr. Miranda Hayes, a renowned pediatric surgeon at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, had taken time from her busy schedule to attend, bringing an elaborate gift and prepared talking points about her love of children and family values. Sofia Montenegro, a successful venture capitalist who had made her fortune investing in women-owned businesses, arrived in a chauffeur-driven Tesla and a couture dress that cost more than most people's annual salaries. Rebecca Chen, a prominent entertainment lawyer who represented A-list celebrities, had flown in from New York specifically for the party, seeing it as an opportunity to combine business networking with personal advancement. Each woman understood the stakes involved. Becoming Mrs. Alexander Blackwell would mean entry into one of America's most powerful families, access to unlimited financial resources, and a social position that opened doors to the highest levels of influence and prestige. The competition was fierce but polite, conducted with the sophisticated maneuvering that characterized interactions among the wealthy elite. Observing all of this preparation from the periphery was Isabella Rodriguez, a 41-year-old woman who had been working as the Blackwell family's head housekeeper for the past 3.5 years. Isabella was responsible for managing the daily operations of the massive estate, supervising a staff of 12 other employees, and ensuring that every detail of the household met Alexander's exacting standards. She had emigrated from Mexico 18 years earlier, leaving behind poverty and limited opportunities in search of a better life for herself and her daughter Anna, who was now a sophomore at Stanford University, studying engineering on a full academic scholarship. Isabella's position in the Blackwell household was complex and multifaceted. To Alexander, she was the perfect employee, efficient, reliable, and invisible until needed. She managed his social calendar, coordinated with his business assistants, and maintained the household with military precision. Their interactions were professional and cordial, but Alexander rarely thought of her as anything more than a highly competent service provider who enabled his lifestyle and business success. But to 7-year-old Benjamin, Isabella was something entirely different. She was the warm, consistent presence who had been there through every major and minor crisis of his young life. She was the person who had comforted him during his parents' screaming matches, who had explained the divorce in terms a small child could understand, and who had celebrated his achievements when his parents were too busy with their own dramas to notice. Isabella knew that Benjamin was afraid of the dark and still sometimes wet his bed when he was anxious. She knew that he loved dinosaurs and space exploration, that he was gifted in mathematics but struggled with reading comprehension, and that he had a sensitive nature that was easily wounded by harsh words or criticism. She had taught him basic Spanish, introduced him to traditional Mexican foods, and shared stories from her own childhood that helped him understand that families came in many different forms. Over the 3.5 years Isabella had worked for the family, she had watched Benjamin grow from a confused and often frightened 3-year-old into a thoughtful, intelligent 7-year-old who possessed remarkable emotional insight for his age. She had been there for his first day of school, his first lost tooth, his first attempts at riding a bicycle, and countless other milestones that his parents had missed due to business travel or social obligations. For Isabella, Benjamin had become the son she had never been able to have more of. Her daughter Anna had been born when Isabella was very young, and financial constraints had made it impossible for her to have additional children. Caring for Benjamin had awakened maternal instincts that she had thought were dormant, and she had found herself loving this lonely little boy with a fierce protectiveness that sometimes surprised her with its intensity. But Isabella was also acutely aware of the boundaries that her position required. She was an employee, not family, and she was careful never to overstep the invisible lines that separated her world from that of her employers. She understood that her presence at events like today's birthday party was purely functional. She was there to coordinate logistics, manage problems, and ensure smooth operations, not to participate as a guest or family member. On this particular Saturday morning, Isabella had been working since 4:30, coordinating with the army of event planners, caterers, florists, and entertainment coordinators who were transforming the estate into what one society reporter had called a fantasy wonderland that would make Disneyland jealous. The grounds had been decorated with elaborate themed areas. A carnival complete with Ferris wheel and carousel, a petting zoo featuring exotic animals, a science exploration zone with interactive exhibits, and a medieval castle where costumed performers entertained children with sword-fighting demonstrations and magic shows. The catering operation alone involved 3 different celebrity chefs, each responsible for a different aspect of the meal. Wolfgang Martinez was preparing gourmet versions of childhood favorites like macaroni and cheese, made with truffle oil and artisanal pasta. James Chen was creating an elaborate dessert station featuring architectural marvels made entirely of sugar and chocolate. Maria Santos was overseeing the adult refreshment area, where premium wines and craft cocktails were being served by bartenders who had trained at the world's finest establishments. Despite her busy schedule coordinating these massive logistical operations, Isabella kept a watchful eye on Benjamin throughout the morning preparations. She noticed that while he was excited about certain aspects of the party, particularly the science exhibits and the opportunity to meet the exotic animals, he seemed increasingly overwhelmed by the scale and formality of the event. Benjamin was a child who thrived on routine and intimate connections. He preferred quiet conversations to large gatherings, and he often felt anxious when he was the center of attention for extended periods. Isabella could see signs of his growing stress in the way he fidgeted with his clothes, the slight tremor in his voice when he spoke to the camera crews documenting the preparations, and the way he kept seeking her out for reassurance throughout the morning. "Isabella," Benjamin said, finding her in the kitchen where she was coordinating with the catering supervisors, "do I really have to talk to all those people today? There are so many of them, and I don't know what to say." Isabella knelt down to his eye level, smoothing his hair with the gentle touch that had comforted him countless times before. "Mi niño, you don't have to say anything special. Just be yourself. That's what makes you wonderful. And remember, I'll be nearby if you need me." "Yo, promise?" "I promise I'll always be here when you need me." The conversation was interrupted by Alexander's arrival in the kitchen, his expression focused and businesslike as he reviewed last-minute details with the catering managers. He barely glanced at Isabella and Benjamin, his attention consumed by ensuring that every aspect of the party met his standards for perfection. "The presentation needs to be flawless," Alexander was saying to the head caterer. "We have reporters from 3 different lifestyle magazines here, plus documentary crews. Everything has to look perfect for the cameras." Isabella noticed that Alexander's instructions focused entirely on appearances and logistics, with no mention of Benjamin's comfort or enjoyment. This was characteristic of Alexander's approach to parenting. He provided his son with the finest material things, but often missed the emotional and psychological needs that were far more important to a 7-year-old child. As the morning progressed and guests began arriving, Isabella found herself managing an increasingly complex web of responsibilities. She was coordinating between different entertainment zones, ensuring that the elaborate gift table was properly organized, managing the media personnel who were documenting the event and troubleshooting the inevitable problems that arose when hosting an event of this magnitude. The first wave of guests included families with children who were immediately directed to the various entertainment areas that had been set up around the grounds. Isabella watched as Benjamin was passed from one adult to another, each wanting to pose for photos with the birthday boy or share in his reflected importance as the son of Alexander Blackwell. The interaction seemed mechanical and hollow to Isabella, more about the adult's social positioning than any genuine interest in Benjamin's happiness. Around noon, the second wave of guests began arriving, the single women who had been identified as potential candidates for the mother selection ceremony. Isabella observed these arrivals with a mixture of curiosity and concern, noting how each woman had clearly prepared for this unusual competition. Dr. Miranda Hayes arrived with a team of medical colleagues, all of whom were eager to network with Alexander and other powerful attendees. Her gift for Benjamin was an elaborate anatomy model that could be disassembled to show internal organs. Impressive and educational, but hardly the kind of present that would appeal to a 7-year-old boy who preferred simple pleasures like building blocks and picture books. Sofia Montenegro made a grand entrance in a vehicle that was more like a mobile showroom than a car, displaying the latest in environmental technology and sustainable luxury. Her gift was a commitment to fund a full college scholarship in Benjamin's name, a generous gesture that would certainly impress adults, but meant nothing to a child who couldn't even comprehend what college meant. Rebecca Chen arrived with a small entourage of entertainment industry figures, transforming her attendance into a networking opportunity that could benefit her law practice. Her gift was a collection of first-edition children's books, beautifully presented but selected by an assistant based on their investment value rather than their appeal to an actual child. Isabella watched these elaborate arrivals with growing unease. Each woman was accomplished and successful in her own right, but their approach to winning Benjamin's affection seemed calculated and artificial. They were competing for the attention of a 7-year-old boy using the same strategies they might employ in boardroom negotiations or business deals. Meanwhile, Benjamin himself was becoming increasingly withdrawn and anxious as the day progressed. Isabella could see him looking around for familiar faces in the sea of strangers, could observe his discomfort with the constant photography and the formal interactions that were expected of him as the guest of honor. Round 2 o'clock, as the party reached its peak with over 400 guests spread across the estate's various entertainment areas, Alexander took the stage that had been erected near the main pool area. The crowd gathered expectantly, champagne glasses in hand, as photographers and videographers positioned themselves for optimal coverage of whatever announcement was planned. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here to celebrate my son Benjamin's 7th birthday, Alexander began, his voice carrying the confident authority that had made him successful in high-stakes business negotiations. I know this party might seem elaborate, but nothing is too good for my boy. The crowd applauded politely, though Isabella noticed that many of the guests seemed more interested in being seen at the exclusive event than in actually celebrating Benjamin's birthday. She watched from the back of the crowd as Benjamin stood beside his father on the elevated platform, looking small and overwhelmed despite his carefully styled appearance and designer clothes. Now, as many of you know, Benjamin's mother and I are no longer together, Alexander continued, his tone remaining professional despite the personal nature of the topic. But I believe strongly that every child benefits from having positive maternal influences in their life. Today, I thought it would be meaningful to give Benjamin the opportunity to choose a mother figure from among the remarkable women here who have expressed interest in becoming part of our family. The announcement sent ripples of excitement through the crowd. The potential candidates straightened their postures and checked their appearances, while married guests exchanged knowing glances about the unusual spectacle they were about to witness. Photographers moved closer to the stage, anticipating the dramatic moment that would surely provide compelling images for their publications. Isabella felt her stomach tighten with discomfort and concern. The idea of turning the selection of a maternal figure into a public competition struck her as fundamentally wrong, more like a reality television show than a child's birthday celebration. She looked at Benjamin's face and saw confusion and anxiety in his expression, though he was trying to maintain the polite smile that had been coached into him for public appearances. "Benjamin," Alexander said, placing his hand on his son's shoulder and turning him to face the assembled crowd, "I want you to look around at all these accomplished, beautiful women. Any one of them would be honored to serve as a mother figure in your life. Take your time, look carefully, and point to the lady you would choose to be your new mother." The request was framed as empowering and child-centered, but everyone understood the real dynamics at play. Whichever woman Benjamin selected would immediately become the front-runner for Alexander's romantic attention, with all the social status and financial security that such a position would provide. The women who were not chosen would face a very public rejection that could damage their social standing and eliminate their chances of joining one of America's most prominent families. Benjamin stood on the elevated platform, his small hand shading his eyes from the California sun, as he surveyed the sea of expectant faces below him. The potential candidates had positioned themselves strategically throughout the crowd, each hoping to catch the child's attention through carefully calculated gestures and expressions. Dr. Miranda Hayes stepped forward slightly, her medical training helping her project an aura of competence and reliability. She had spent the earlier part of the party engaging Benjamin in conversations about science and nature, believing that intellectual stimulation would appeal to the son of a successful businessman. Sofia Montenegro caught Benjamin's eye and gestured toward the elaborate outdoor learning center she had funded as part of her gift to him, a state-of-the-art facility that would allow him to explore environmental science and sustainable technology. She had calculated that demonstrating her commitment to his education and future would influence his decision in her favor. Rebecca Chen maintained her lawyer's professional composure while positioning herself near the stage where Benjamin could easily observe her designer outfit and perfectly styled appearance. She had been circulating stories about her philanthropic work with children's charities, hoping that word of her charitable interests would reach both Benjamin and his father. But as Benjamin's gaze moved slowly across the crowd of hundreds of people, it didn't linger on any of the obvious candidates who had been competing for his attention throughout the day. Instead, his eyes found Isabella, who was standing at the very back of the gathering, partially concealed behind the catering coordination area, where she was managing the logistics of serving birthday cake to over 400 guests. For a long moment, their eyes met across the crowd of elaborately dressed, socially prominent people. Isabella saw recognition and relief in Benjamin's expression, as if he had found the one familiar and genuinely caring face in an ocean of strangers who were more interested in his father's wealth than in his own well-being. Without thinking, Isabella smiled at him and gave a small, encouraging wave, the same simple gesture she used every morning when she helped him get ready for school and every evening when she tucked him into bed. "Take your time, son," Alexander said, his voice carrying a hint of impatience as Benjamin continued to scan the crowd without making an obvious selection. "Any of these wonderful ladies would be privileged to become part of our family." The crowd grew increasingly quiet as the dramatic moment stretched on. Photographers held their cameras ready, society reporters prepared to document which woman would emerge victorious from this unprecedented competition, and the potential candidates maintained their bright smiles while internally calculating their chances of success. Then something happened that no one in attendance had anticipated, and that would be talked about in California social circles for years to come. Instead of pointing to one of the accomplished, wealthy, socially prominent women who had positioned themselves as candidates for the role, Benjamin raised his small hand and pointed directly at Isabella. "I choose her," he said, his young voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent crowd. "I choose Isabella to be my new mother." The silence that followed was profound and uncomfortable. 400 of California's most sophisticated and influential people stood frozen in shock, trying to process what had just occurred. The little boy, who was supposed to choose between pediatric surgeons and venture capitalists and entertainment lawyers, had instead selected the housekeeper. Alexander's face went through several distinct color changes as he realized the magnitude of the social catastrophe unfolding on his own stage, in front of his own guests, at his own son's birthday party. His publicist, watching from the side of the crowd with growing horror, looked like she was experiencing a cardiac event in real time. The documentary crews continued filming, understanding that they were capturing something far more dramatic and authentic than anything they had originally planned to document. "Benjamin," Alexander said quietly, leaning down toward his son, with an expression that mixed embarrassment with paternal authority. "I think you might have misunderstood the activity. We're asking you to choose one of the special guest ladies here today, not one of our household staff members." But Benjamin, with the fearless honesty and unshakable logic that only children possess, shook his head firmly and looked directly at his father. "No, Daddy. You said to choose a new mother, but Isabella is already like my mother. She takes care of me every single day. She makes my breakfast exactly how I like it. She helps me with my homework when it's hard. She reads me stories before bed, and she gives the best hugs when I'm sad or scared. Why would I choose someone I don't even know when I already have the best mother right here?" The 7-year-old's reasoning was unassailable and devastating. In a few simple sentences, he had exposed the emptiness and artificiality of the entire spectacle, while simultaneously revealing the shallow nature of his father's approach to finding a maternal influence for him. More than that, he had publicly declared his love and loyalty for a woman that everyone else at the party had been socially conditioned to overlook and dismiss as irrelevant. Isabella stood frozen at the back of the crowd, tears streaming down her face as she processed what had just happened. In 3.5 years of caring for Benjamin, providing him with the emotional support and daily attention that his parents were too busy to offer, she had never dared to imagine that he thought of her as a mother figure. She had been scrupulously careful to maintain appropriate professional boundaries, to remember her place as an employee in the household, and to never presume that her feelings of fierce maternal love were reciprocated by the child she had come to adore. But here was this brave, honest little boy, standing in front of 400 of the most powerful and influential people in California, declaring that the Mexican housekeeper who had raised him was more worthy of being called his mother than any of the accomplished women competing for the title. The crowd remained silent, unsure how to react to this unprecedented breach of social protocol. The potential candidates looked embarrassed and confused, their carefully planned strategies for winning over the child rendered completely irrelevant by his unexpected choice. Many guests began whispering among themselves, speculating about what this meant for Alexander's reputation and social standing. Alexander himself was struggling to regain control of a situation that had spiraled completely beyond his expectations and management. His first instinct was damage control, to find a way to redirect Benjamin's choice toward one of the socially appropriate candidates and minimize the embarrassment of having his son publicly declare his preference for the household staff. "Benjamin, sweetheart," Alexander said, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining composure in front of the cameras and crowd. "Isabella is wonderful, and our family is very grateful for everything she does for us. But when we talk about choosing a new mother, we mean someone who could actually become part of our family in an official capacity. Someone who could marry Daddy and help take care of you in a more formal way. But Benjamin, displaying the same persistence and determination that his father usually admired in business contexts, was not backing down from his position. But Isabella already takes care of me better than anyone else in the whole world. She knows that I like my sandwiches cut into triangles and that I'm scared of the thunderstorms. She remembers to check my school folder every day, and she never forgets to put my special blanket in the dryer so it's warm when I go to bed. She knows all my favorite books, and she makes up funny voices for all the characters. None of those other ladies even know what my favorite color is. The child's words landed like precision-guided missiles in the carefully constructed social hierarchy of the party. He was systematically dismantling every assumption that the adults had made about value, worth, qualification, and appropriateness. To Benjamin, the woman who knew his daily routines, understood his emotional needs, and had been consistently present throughout his life, was obviously more qualified to be his mother than strangers who had impressive resumes but no understanding of who he actually was as a person. Dr. Miranda Hayes, attempting to salvage something from the situation and demonstrate her professional expertise with children, stepped forward with her practiced bedside manner. "Benjamin, that's very sweet of you to feel that way about Isabella, but being a mother involves many different kinds of responsibilities that require specific education and training and capabilities." Benjamin looked at her with the kind of devastating directness that only children can manage, completely unimpressed by her credentials or authority. "What kind of training? Isabella raised her own daughter, and Anna is really smart, and she's going to be an engineer, and she's one of the nicest people I know. Isabella taught me how to tie my shoes, and how to say please and thank you in Spanish, and how to make scrambled eggs that aren't too wet or too dry. She knows how to make me feel better when I'm sick, and how to help me with math homework, and how to fix my bicycle when the chain falls off. What other training does a mother need?" Dr. Hayes found herself speechless, unable to articulate why her medical degree and professional accomplishments made her more qualified for motherhood than a woman who had demonstrably successful experience raising children and had been providing daily maternal care for Benjamin for years. Sofia Montenegro tried a different approach, drawing on her business background to make a logical argument. "But sweetheart, when adults choose life partners, there are other important considerations like shared interests and compatible lifestyles and similar educational backgrounds and common goals for the future." "Isabella and I have lots of shared interests," Benjamin replied, with the unshakable confidence of a child who knew his own mind. "We both like gardening and cooking and reading books about space exploration. We both think thunderstorms are scary, but also beautiful to watch. We both get sad when people are mean to animals. We both love learning new things and asking questions about how stuff works. And we both love each other, which seems like the most important thing for a family." The crowd was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with the child's ability to expose the shallow and superficial nature of their social assumptions and expectations. Several guests began looking toward the exits, recognizing that they were witnessing something that could become deeply embarrassing for everyone involved. Rebecca Chen, drawing on her legal training and experience in high-stakes negotiations, attempted to introduce more sophisticated reasoning. "Benjamin, families are complex legal and financial arrangements that involve considerations beyond just emotional connections. There are matters of compatibility in terms of social background, economic status, educational achievement, and long-term planning that adults need to consider." But Benjamin's response revealed wisdom that far exceeded his 7 years of age. Why do any of those things matter more than love and kindness? Isabella came from a different country, and she didn't have much money, but she worked really hard to learn English and to take care of her daughter and to make a good life. She's smart and brave and strong, and she always knows how to solve problems and make things better. Isn't that more important than having lots of money or going to fancy schools? The child's innocent questions were striking at the heart of the value system that governed the lives of everyone present at the party. He was challenging fundamental assumptions about worth, merit, and social hierarchy that most of the adults had never seriously examined or questioned. But Isabella, who had been standing in stunned silence throughout this exchange, finally found her voice. She began walking toward the stage, her practical work shoes clicking on the stone pathway that cut through the crowd of designer high heels and Italian leather loafers. "Benjamin, mi niño precioso," she called out as she approached the platform, her accented English carrying easily across the silent gathering. "Come here, sweetheart." Benjamin immediately broke away from his father's side and ran to the edge of the stage, where Isabella lifted him down into her arms. The hug that followed was so natural and full of genuine affection that it made the artificial interactions he had been having with party guests throughout the day look even more hollow and performative by comparison. "I am so deeply honored that you think of me as your mother," Isabella said softly, speaking directly to Benjamin but loud enough that the crowd could hear every word. "You are the most wonderful, intelligent, kind little boy in the world, and I love you with all my heart. But your father is right that there are different kinds of families and different kinds of love, and sometimes the situation is more complicated than we wish it could be." Alexander breathed a visible sigh of relief, assuming that Isabella was going to gracefully extract them all from this social disaster by explaining to Benjamin why his choice was inappropriate and directing him toward one of the socially acceptable candidates. But Isabella was far from finished speaking, and what she said next would be remembered and quoted in California social circles for decades to come. "What your father doesn't understand," she continued, her voice growing stronger and more confident with each word, "is that being a mother has nothing to do with money or social status or educational credentials or professional accomplishments. Being a mother is about loving a child unconditionally, about being there for them when they need comfort or guidance or encouragement, about putting their happiness and well-being before your own wants and desires and ambitions." She turned to face Alexander and the crowd of guests, still holding Benjamin securely in her arms, her expression reflecting a dignity and strength that commanded attention and respect. "I have had the incredible honor and privilege of caring for this beautiful, special boy for 3.5 years. I have watched him grow and learn and develop into the kind, thoughtful, intelligent person he is today. I've been there for his nightmares and his celebrations, his scraped knees and his proud moments, his questions about the world and his fears about things he doesn't understand. I know his hopes and dreams and worries because I have taken the time to listen to him and to value what he has to say." The crowd was completely silent now, captivated by this unexpected speech from a woman they had barely noticed before this moment, transfixed by her eloquence and the obvious depth of her relationship with the child in her arms. "So, when Benjamin says he chooses me to be his mother, he is not making a mistake or misunderstanding the game or acting out of confusion. He is recognizing something that all of you have missed, that love and care and attention and consistency are what make a family, not wealth or beauty or social position or professional achievements." Isabella's words were like a mirror held up to the gathered crowd, reflecting back their own values and priorities in a way that made many of them deeply uncomfortable. She was articulating truths about family and love that everyone knew intellectually but had become accustomed to ignoring in favor of more pragmatic and socially advantageous considerations. "Furthermore," Isabella continued, her voice carrying the strength and conviction of someone who had finally decided to speak her truth regardless of the personal or professional consequences, "I want all of you to understand something very important about this child. Benjamin is not a prize to be won or a prop to be used in your social games or a stepping stone to be used for advancing your personal ambitions. He is a human being with thoughts and feelings and opinions and needs that matter. The fact that you would turn his need for maternal love into a competition for your own entertainment says everything about your priorities and nothing about his worth or value. Alexander's face was growing redder by the minute, but he seemed paralyzed by the unprecedented nature of the situation. Never in his carefully controlled and managed life had an employee publicly challenged his decisions and exposed his shortcomings in front of his social peers and business associates. "Benjamin," Isabella said, turning back to the child in her arms with infinite tenderness, "I want you to remember something very important for the rest of your life. Your value as a person doesn't depend on how much money your family has, or what kind of house you live in, or whether people think you're important because of your last name. Your value comes from your kind heart, your curious mind, your generous spirit, and your ability to love other people genuinely and unconditionally. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you have to choose between what your heart knows is right and what other people think is socially appropriate or advantageous." She set Benjamin down gently and knelt to his eye level, holding his small hands in hers with infinite care and attention. "And yes, mi amor, I would be honored to be your mother in any way that's possible and appropriate, not because your father chooses me, and not because it would benefit me socially or financially, but because you are already my son in my heart. And you have been since the very first day I started taking care of you. Nothing that happens today will ever change that love or that bond between us." The crowd erupted in surprised murmurs and whispered conversations as guests tried to process what they had just witnessed. Some seemed genuinely moved by the emotion and authenticity of the exchange, while others appeared scandalized by the social boundaries that had been crossed and the hierarchies that had been challenged. But the most surprising reaction came from an unexpected source. Ana Rodriguez, Isabella's 19-year-old daughter, had been working as part of the catering staff to earn extra money for her Stanford University expenses. She had been watching the entire scene unfold from behind the service tent, and now she emerged wearing her catering uniform and walked confidently toward the stage area. "Excuse me," Anna said, her voice carrying the confidence and poise of someone who had inherited her mother's strength and dignity. "I would like to say something, if that's okay." Alexander looked like he was about to object, but the crowd's attention had shifted to this new speaker, and he seemed to recognize that he had already lost complete control of his own son's birthday party. "My name is Ana Rodriguez, and Isabella is my mother," Anna announced clearly, standing tall and speaking with the assurance of someone who had been raised to value education, hard work, and self-respect above social status or material wealth. "I want everyone here to understand exactly what kind of woman your son chose, Mr. Blackwell, because I don't think you have any idea of her character or capabilities or the sacrifices she has made to build a good life for both of us." Anna stood with perfect posture and spoke with the eloquence of someone who had excelled academically while working multiple jobs to support her education. "My mother came to this country with nothing but hope and determination and an unshakable belief that hard work and integrity would eventually lead to opportunities for a better life. She has cleaned houses and offices and hotels, not because she lacked ambition or intelligence or capabilities, but because she understood that honest work has dignity regardless of how much it pays or how other people perceive it." The crowd was listening intently now, perhaps for the first time, truly seeing Isabella as a complete, complex person, rather than just a service provider who ensured their comfort and convenience. "My mother made sure I did my homework every single night, even when she was exhausted from working 14-hour days, to support us. She taught me to be proud of our heritage while embracing the opportunities that this country offered to people willing to work for them. She sacrificed her own comfort, her own social life, her own dreams and ambitions, so that I could get the education she never had the chance to pursue." Anna's voice grew stronger and more passionate as she continued. I am a sophomore at Stanford University studying mechanical engineering, and I'm on track to graduate summa cum laude, just like my mother would have if she had been given the same opportunities and advantages that most of you take for granted. But more importantly than any academic achievement, my mother taught me that success is not measured by how much money you accumulate, or how many famous people you know, or what kind of house you live in. Success is measured by how you treat other people, especially those who cannot help you in return, and by whether you use your opportunities to make the world a little bit better than you found it. She turned to address Benjamin directly, her expression full of warmth and genuine affection. Benjamin, you made the smartest, most important choice anyone could possibly make. My mother is the strongest, kindest, most loving person I know. She will protect you and guide you and love you unconditionally, just like she did for me throughout my entire life. You're getting the best mother in the world, and you're smart enough to recognize that even when all these adults couldn't see it. The applause that followed Anna's speech was spontaneous and genuine, unlike the polite social clapping that had characterized most of the party's interactions. Several guests were openly wiping away tears, moved by the obvious love and respect between mother and daughter, and by the eloquent defense of Isabella's character and capabilities. But the most important reaction came from Benjamin himself. He looked up at Isabella with eyes shining with happiness and pride and vindication. "See, Daddy? I told you Isabella was the best choice. Even her own daughter says so. And she's really smart because she goes to Stanford and she's going to be an engineer and build amazing things." Alexander found himself in an impossible position that he had never encountered in decades of successful business negotiations and social maneuvering. His son had publicly declared his love for the housekeeper. The housekeeper had eloquently defended her worthiness for the maternal role. Her daughter had testified to her character and capabilities with impressive passion and intelligence, and a crowd of several hundred influential people had witnessed the entire exchange. Any attempt to dismiss or minimize what had happened would make him look heartless, foolish, and completely out of touch with basic human values. Moreover, Alexander was beginning to realize something that fundamentally challenged his understanding of his own life and priorities. For 3.5 years, he had been so focused on building his business empire, managing his public image, and navigating his social obligations that he had essentially outsourced the raising of his son to Isabella. She had been the one to comfort Benjamin during the trauma of the divorce proceedings, to celebrate his small victories and achievements, to provide the consistent love and attention that every child needs for healthy emotional development. In his arrogance and social blindness, Alexander had never truly acknowledged the depth and importance of Isabella's relationship with Benjamin, or the quality of care she had provided. He had seen her as an employee performing services rather than as a woman who had devoted herself completely to loving and nurturing his child with the same fierce dedication she had shown to her own daughter. The silence stretched on as Alexander struggled with how to respond appropriately. The crowd waited expectantly, the cameras continued rolling, and his son looked at him with hopeful eyes, waiting to see if his father would honor his choice or dismiss it as socially inappropriate. Finally, Alexander did something that surprised everyone present, including himself. He stepped down from the stage and walked slowly over to where Isabella was standing with Benjamin and Anna. "Isabella," he said quietly, his voice lacking its usual commanding authority, "I owe you a sincere and heartfelt apology. I've been so focused on what I thought was best for Benjamin, so concerned with managing appearances and social expectations, that I never really listened to what he was trying to tell me about what he actually needed." Isabella looked at him with cautious surprise, unsure where this conversation was leading and what it might mean for her future employment and security. "You've been more of a mother to Benjamin than anyone else in his life, including his biological mother who gave birth to him. You've provided him with stability, love, guidance, and consistency while I was busy building my career and managing my business obligations. And instead of recognizing and honoring that incredible contribution, I've taken it for granted and treated you like just another household employee." Alexander paused, looking around at the crowd of guests who were hanging on every word of this unprecedented public confession. "My son is smarter and wiser than I am. He understands what makes a real family better than all of us supposedly sophisticated adults. He knows that love and care and attention and emotional connection matter infinitely more than money or status or social connections or professional achievements." He turned back to Isabella, his expression reflecting genuine remorse and newfound respect. "I don't know what this means legally or practically or socially, but I want you to know that if you're willing, I would be deeply honored to have you officially become part of our family, not as an employee, not as hired help, but as Benjamin's mother in every way that matters and in any way that's possible." The crowd gasped audibly at this unprecedented development. Alexander Blackwell, one of the most eligible and powerful men in California, was essentially proposing to his housekeeper in front of 400 of Los Angeles's most influential people. But Isabella, with the wisdom that comes from years of raising children and understanding what really matters in life, responded in a way that surprised and impressed everyone present. "Mr. Blackwell, I deeply appreciate what you're trying to do, and I'm grateful that you're finally acknowledging the relationship that Benjamin and I have built over these years. But becoming a family isn't something that happens because of grand public gestures or dramatic declarations. It's something that grows over time through daily acts of love and commitment and mutual respect." She looked down at Benjamin, who was watching the exchange with wide eyes and obvious fascination. "Benjamin and I already have a family relationship that's been built on 3.5 years of trust and love and shared experiences. What we need to figure out is how to honor and protect that relationship while also being honest about the realities of our different backgrounds, circumstances, and social positions." Isabella's response demonstrated the kind of mature, thoughtful approach to complex situations that had made her such an effective parent figure for Benjamin. "I don't need a wedding ceremony or a legal title or social recognition to be Benjamin's mother. I already am his mother in all the ways that actually matter and count. What I need is for that relationship to be respected and supported, and for Benjamin to understand that love doesn't depend on legal documents or social approval or other people's opinions about what's appropriate." She turned to address the crowd directly, her voice carrying clearly across the silent gathering. "All of you came here today expecting to watch a little boy choose a new mother, like he was selecting a toy from a store catalog. But what you actually witnessed was a child teaching all of us about the difference between genuine love and social performance. Benjamin didn't choose me because I was the most beautiful or accomplished or wealthy option available to him. He chose me because I'm the person who has loved him unconditionally and consistently throughout his entire life, who has been there for him during his most difficult and vulnerable moments." The party continued for another 2 hours, but the entire dynamic and atmosphere had shifted completely. Guests who had previously ignored Isabella now approached her with genuine interest and respect, asking about her background, her relationship with Benjamin, and her daughter's impressive academic achievements. Several people commented on Anna's eloquent speech and her obvious intelligence and poise. The potential mother candidates gracefully withdrew from the competition, with several expressing genuine admiration for the bond between Isabella and Benjamin. Dr. Miranda Hayes told reporters that she had learned something profound about the difference between professional qualifications and personal suitability for parenthood. Sofia Montenegro said that witnessing the exchange had reminded her of the importance of authentic relationships over strategic partnerships, but perhaps the most significant change was in Alexander himself. As he watched Isabella interact with Benjamin and the other guests throughout the remainder of the party, he began to see her as a complete person for the first time, rather than just an efficient employee. He noticed her intelligence, her natural warmth with children, her ability to navigate complex social situations with grace and dignity, and her unwavering commitment to putting Benjamin's needs before her own comfort or advancement. More importantly, he saw how completely Benjamin trusted and loved her, and how naturally she protected and nurtured him without any thought of personal benefit or recognition. The relationship between them was so obviously genuine and deep that it made Alexander realize how much of his son's emotional life he had missed while pursuing business success and social status. Over the following weeks and months, Alexander made significant changes to his work schedule and personal priorities. He began spending more time at home, participating in Benjamin's daily routines, and working to build the kind of meaningful relationship with his son that Isabella had been modeling for years. He also began to see Isabella differently, not as an employee, but as a partner in raising Benjamin and as a remarkable woman who had overcome significant challenges to build a successful and meaningful life for herself and her daughter. He was impressed by her strength, her wisdom, her unwavering principles, and her complete dedication to Benjamin's well-being. The transformation wasn't immediate or simple. Isabella was understandably cautious about Alexander's sudden interest in her as a person, rather than just a housekeeper. She had worked too hard to build her independence, self-respect, and financial security to risk them on a relationship that might be motivated more by guilt or social pressure than genuine affection and respect. But over time, as Alexander consistently demonstrated his commitment to being a better father and his genuine respect for Isabella's contributions to their family, something deeper and more meaningful began to develop between them. Not the superficial attraction that had characterized his previous relationships, but a genuine partnership based on shared love for Benjamin and mutual respect for each other's strengths, experiences, and capabilities. Anna, initially skeptical of Alexander's motives and concerned about her mother's emotional and financial security, gradually came to appreciate his sincere efforts to change and grow. She also developed a warm relationship with Benjamin, who looked up to her like the brilliant big sister he had never had. 18 months later, Alexander and Isabella married in a small private ceremony focused on celebrating their commitment to building a loving family together, rather than making a social statement or creating a media spectacle. Benjamin served as ring-bearer, beaming with pride and happiness at seeing his chosen mother officially become part of their family. The wedding made headlines, of course, with various media outlets sensationalizing the billionaire marries housekeeper angle. But those who actually knew the family understood that the real story was about a little boy's wisdom in recognizing authentic love, where adults had been too blinded by social prejudices to see it. Inna graduated from Stanford with highest honors and was accepted to MIT for graduate school in mechanical engineering, with Alexander proudly offering to support her education as a gift to his new stepdaughter. Isabella enrolled in business management courses to help her understand Alexander's work and to develop her own ideas for charitable initiatives focused on supporting immigrant families and educational opportunities for underserved communities. But perhaps the most important change was in Benjamin himself. The 7-year-old, who had boldly chosen love over social expectations, grew up in a household where his emotional intelligence and moral courage were valued as much as academic achievement or material success. He learned that real strength comes from treating all people with dignity and respect, regardless of their background, circumstances, or social position. Years later, when Benjamin was asked about the famous birthday party where he had chosen the housekeeper as his new mother, he would smile and explain that it hadn't really been a choice at all. Isabella had already been his mother in every way that mattered, All he had done was help the adults around him finally recognize something that had been obvious to him for years. The story became legendary in California social circles, retold as an example of how children's honesty can expose adult hypocrisy and how authentic love can triumph over social prejudice when people have the courage to follow their hearts rather than their social expectations. But for the Blackwell Rodriguez family, it was simply the beginning of their real life together. A life built on the foundation that a wise 7-year-old had laid when he dared to point past wealth and status and social position to the woman who had loved him unconditionally from the very beginning. If this incredible story of a child's wisdom and a mother's love touched your heart and made you think about what truly matters in life, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more amazing stories that celebrate the power of love over social expectations. Share in the comments below a time when a child in your life taught you something important about what really matters, or when you witnessed genuine love triumph over artificial barriers. Let's honor the Benjamins and Isabellas of the world who see with their hearts instead of their social conditioning. Sometimes, the most profound truths about family and love come from the smallest voices, and the greatest families are built not on money or status, but on unconditional love and daily acts of caring. Your story might inspire someone else to recognize the hidden heroes and authentic love in their own life.